So I actually watched a lot of horror movies over the past couple days because some of my good friends are in the mood to watch some horror movies, and I think the first one we watched was one of my favorite horror movies of all time. One movie that I've seen several times. I just kind of want to talk about, and that's the original Wes Craven classic, The Hills Have Eyes from 1977. We actually watched the remake shortly after, but I just kind of want to talk about why I enjoy the original so much. And I believe this was Wes Craven's second horror film that he directed on a. I don't know if it was. Uh, Last House on the Left was certainly an independent movie, but this one actually got a theatrical release. And I haven't looked at his catalog, but obviously Wes Craven, he did A Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like that. But this is one of his biggest successes, right? And for good reason. And it centers around this family that is traveling out to LA, and they stop off in the desert because they want to look at some, like, scenic Grand Canyon esque stuff, scenery, whatever, on the way to LA. And they kind of get lost on a dirt road, and they stop by at a gas station trying to, find their way back. And they are advised not to go through the mountains, but they do anyway, and they end up crashing their car, being stranded, and in short proximity to a cannibalistic family that preys on them and essentially kills them, I guess, one by one, in kind of a definitely not a slasher type way, but terrorizes the family, I would say. And I think the things that set this movie apart for me personally, first off, I do really like the cast. I love the characters. You Big Bob, and then you also have his wife. Then you have his kids, or their kids. One of them is married with a husband and an infant baby, and then there's two, what you can presume to be like young adult slash teenage children. And then also the thing everybody remembers this movie for is the two dogs, Beauty and Beast, right? The German shepherds that are pretty badass. And they have an RV. And I don't know, I was always fascinated. This movie came out in like 1977. And just mobile homes in general at that point in time kind of fascinate me because, motor vehicles, not to say they were, primitive, but compared to today, the capabilities and the electricity and just kind of the technological side of having a mobile home for almost 45 years ago, I kind of be interested. I would love to go back in time and walk around in an RV, because I mean it looks up to snuff, right? Like it looks like, just a shitty version of what an RV would look like today, which is pretty cool, right? And I'm always, really fascinated by some of the older technology from movies from the 70s and 80s, like for example, like Friday the 13th Part 4, Corey Feldman and the computer he has, right? I forget what it's called, but like the original Atari supercomputer or whatever the fuck. That's fucking cool, right? And for some reason that RV is always something that kind of jumped out to me. But yeah, Big Bob's pretty cool. The mom, she reminds me a lot of my grandmother. Like she looks like her, and she also just acts that way as well. And then you have Bobby and Brenda. Brenda is, an emotional and, kind of, I don't want to say damsel in distress, but I mean, she goes through some real crazy shit. I mean, at one point she is raped. And Bobby is, that young kind of, I don't want to say pussy type character, but he's just a teen who is thrust into this like role where he has to defend his family, right? And I think in this movie he takes on that responsibility more so than in the remake. But you also have Doug, who looks like fucking Ringo Starr, epic mustache, epic bowl cut. And they all split up, right? Bob, after they crash, Bob goes back to the gas station, and then Doug goes the other way. And it's pretty cool, actually. They don't show where Doug went, but he comes back with all of this stuff because, it takes place at like a U.S. military bomb testing site out there, like where they like test nukes and stuff, because it's just like a desert wasteland, in the middle of like Nevada, I think. And so like they show him coming back with all of these like, I don't want to say knickknacks, but like just things that were just left. Like he talks about being able to open up a military surplus store with all the stuff that he found. I wish they would actually go back and show that, like a couple scene or so of him just exploring that, because I mean, with the cannibalistic family, what are the odds that they're not like there, like waiting? I don't know. I think it could have made for a pretty cool scene. But the old guy at the gas station, the father of the Hills Have Eyes lunar clan, if you will, he is a likable character, I think. He's just a poor guy who is tired and just like he doesn't want to live like this. He doesn't want to continue murdering people and feeding his cannibalistic son and his little tribe of heathens that he calls them anymore. He wants to move away. He wants to get away from all this bullshit and just go off into the real world, right? And at the beginning he tries to kill himself when Bob comes back, and he tells like the brief origin story of the family, and the Papa Jupiter character. I will say, in the original, I can understand why some people might think the family itself is kind of dull. I get that, especially in comparison to the remake, but you have to be aware of the time period when this movie was made. A lot of the makeup effects are very practical, and they used the set designer, I don't remember his name, Robert Hamilton or something like that. It's the same guy who did work on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and he actually used a lot of the props and a lot of the little like bones and stuff like that. He used what was left over from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre set, which I think is pretty badass. And just in general, like a lot of the cannibal clan, we'll call them that, the lunar clan, their costume design is fucking cool. Like the necklaces and like their tunics and stuff, like they look badass. They really do. But I specifically like the scene where he gets back to the gas station. Big Bulb gets back to the gas station, and he's being explained the origin story, and then right after the climax, boom, Papa Jupiter busts through and kills his dad. And then there's a slow stock scene where they end up killing Big Bob, and then they light him on fire, and there's this big epic moment where they light his body on fire, and that draws out the family from the RV and just leaves like two people in there. And then the clan ambushes them, and there's like double-sided, like there's just a rock and a hard place. And then that scene where they extinguish Bob's flaming body, and then they run back to the RV to find his baby. Doug finds his baby is gone, his wife is shot and killed, and then his mother-in-law is also nearly dead, and his sister-in-law has been raped. And like it's just like, whoa, it's just a mind fuck. In the remake, I will say it does a great job because it's even more disturbing, and like it's that same kind of like realization of like, holy shit, is enforced with a little bit more oomph, a little more emphasis. It's still a pretty brutal scene. And like the lunar clan in general, I love Pluto, played by Michael Berryman. I thought it was so cool how they just got this goofy looking, oddball guy. They didn't give him much makeup or anything like that. He's just a dude, and he's pretty enjoyable throughout the movie. He's kind of a cackly little villain. But then you also have Mars, you have Mercury, and then you have Papa Jupiter, Ruby, and then the wife. And Mercury is like mentally challenged or something. Like he is by far the stupidest of the group, but he's like in charge of like keeping lookout on the family. And then there's the great scene, and there's so much to talk about this movie because I love it so much. I've seen it so many times. But the dogs, right? So the first one goes out, gets killed. Bobby runs after her and finds her like split open. And we learn later on in the movie that was Pluto who did that, right? Mr. Michael Berryman. But the other dog, Beast, goes and exacts revenge. It's badass. Beast is amazing. That's another reason why I love this movie, because the dog goes sicko mode. Not only does it push poor Mercury off of the ledge and kills him, but later on in the movie he goes even more sicko mode and kills Pluto, which is cool. Shout out Michael Berryman. He did a fantastic job. I love him in this movie. Yeah, Mercury is definitely the one who gets the least screen time of all of the Lunar Clan, I guess, save for maybe the mom. But they have like these walkie-talkie systems, which I think is really fucking cool. And I think that that's one of the coolest parts of the movie. There's the moment where they accidentally lose one of the walkie-talkies, and so the family is able to like keep it in the RV, and they're able to use it to kind of eavesdrop on the Lunar Clan and kind of see them when they're coming in a way. But yeah, I like that. But other members of the Lunar Clan, you have Mars, right? And Mars is like the most grotesque and like the most. He reminds me a lot of the guy from Last House on the Left. I cannot remember his fucking name, but they look really similar too. And I almost was like, is this the same actor? Because they have the little curly black afro the same. And they're just as fucked up. They're just as brutal. They're just as awful in that movie as they are in this movie, right? The characters. They're pretty similar, actually. They both commit rape. They both commit murder. They're both really just fucking devilish and just have supreme sociopathic tendencies. And so, he bites off the head of the chicken or of the bird. He, ends up at the end having the little showdown with Doug. He is definitely a villain that I guess you can appreciate, right, in a fucked up horror movie enjoying way. And then you also have Papa Jupiter, who is the the ringleader, if you will. He comes in at the beginning of the movie and he kills his dad as well as Big Bob. There's that scene where they're all eating dinner and he's like screaming at Bob's like corpse, talking about eating the brains of his kids. Kind of a cool scene. I like that. And he has the split nose because he was beat when he was a kid with like a tire iron or whatever. But you also have the getup. Like I said, I think it was Robert Hamilton, I believe was his name. I love the wardrobe. I love the set. I do love the work that they were able to do there. I think it was really well done. And then finally you have good old Pluto, or no, not Pluto. You have Ruby, who is the lone female of the clan, and she is trying to, like her grandfather, move on, get the fuck out of there, and just not participate in this fucked up shit that they've been doing, their whole lives. And it's funny, at the beginning of the movie, the grandfather is like, there's no way you'd make it out with the city folk. Like, you're stuck here. There's nothing you can do. And, Ruby saves the baby, Doug's baby's life, and she's a very likable character. And, at the very end of the movie, she ends up kind of not sacrificing herself. She sacrifices herself in the remake, that's for sure. But she ends up killing her brother, indirectly, I guess, and saving the kids, and Doug and the baby, and also Beast, which is kind of nice. The mom, I would say, is the one that is the least significant, the one that you see the least of on screen, and she's also the only one that like doesn't ever come back, because all of the other characters are killed except for her. You see her briefly, like in their little hut that they have, but you never see her again. And after, you know, they kill all of the other Lunar Clan members and like escape, there's no callback at all, which is kind of interesting. I don't know, maybe they forgot about her, or you know, she just died, or what. I don't know. But what I will say is the death scenes are epic, and it's mainly the villain death scenes are the ones that you really look out for. Good old Beast does a number on not only Mercury pushing him off the ledge, but also Pluto bites his leg and his foot, and let me tell you, it's fucked. And then just in general, he, you know, bites his neck and kills him that way. And the scene itself is pretty amazing. I always love that scene of him and Papa Jupiter jogging down and watching Beast sitting and watching him as they run the opposite way, and he stops and looks, and all of a sudden the dog comes and bites his leg and then ends up killing him. And it's just a great scene, and you always love that, right? People love dogs, right? And they especially love dogs who are heroic and who help good guys defeat bad guys. And that's a component of this movie that, you know, like everybody else, I enjoy thoroughly, and I love that about this movie. You know, may Beauty rest in peace. You know, as sad as it is to see the corpse of a dog, you know, I guess it makes it that much more gratifying that, you know, the other dog is able to exact revenge or whatever. But also the elaborate scheme that the two siblings, Bobby and Brenda, are able to build up in order to kill Papa Jupiter is pretty intense, actually, because they bait him out by using the corpse of their dead mother, and then they like have him get tied and like lassoed into the RV, and they end up like lighting propane tanks and blowing it up. Somehow it doesn't fucking kill him, but they end up being able to take him out later on. How he didn't die, I do not fucking know. But you know, she comes in with the axe and fucking hits him right in the back, which is pretty fucking badass. But that whole sequence, the climax of this movie is really good, and I think it's really strong, and it finishes well with our boy Doug versus Mars on the cliffside, and you know, Mars is getting the best of Doug for sure. But then Ruby comes and saves the day with the frickin' rattlesnake. You'll love it. And there's somewhat of a happy ending, you know, because there's 3 deaths on the side of the family, I believe. The mom, the dad, and the sister. And then there's 4 deaths on the side of the lunar family, right? There's Mars, Mercury, Pluto, and Papa Jupiter. So they actually win. They win 3-4. Fuck yeah. But no, Hills Have Eyes it's one of my favorite movies. It's a 5 out of 5. I recommend it to friends, to family, to horror fans. You know, I'm a huge fan of the Isolation movies. I actually really liked the remake as well. The sequel to the remake, it's not as bad as people say it is. But yeah, I mean, it's one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Was like my favorite horror movie for a very long time. I wouldn't say it's up there. It's probably maybe in my top 10. I don't know. But it's one that I've seen time in and time out, and I definitely recommend it to tons of different people. And I think, you know, the spooky atmosphere and the setting itself, if you're not scared by the villains themselves, I guess I can kind of understand that. Whatever. But just kind of being lost out there in the middle of the desert where, you know, nobody's going to be able to look for you, nobody's going to be able to find you, and there's no help for miles and miles and miles, that in itself is disturbing and creepy. And, you know, with how much of a wasteland it is out there in some of the western parts of the United States, for all we know, shit like this, people like this, what's to say they don't actually exist? You know, and yeah, that's why I think that Hills Have Eyes, one of the better horror films of the 70s, personally. 5 out of 5. I love it and always have.